Hey there, it's Bill Weemuth from HistoryHighlights.com. Hey, I hope you've had a chance to see my recent online video presentation about the Grand Excursion. What a fascinating story in 1854 as a railroad and then steamboat trip up the upper Mississippi River all the way to St. Paul changed the history of that part of the country forever. Well, I promised you during that presentation a little personal follow-up because 150 years later, in 2004, there was a recreation of the Grand Excursion. And my wife Laura and I were honored to be contracted to perform and lecture on board a steamboat called the Mississippi Queen, participating in this great Grand Excursion recreation. She was a beautiful old boat. Oh, I loved working on that vessel. And I have to show you this one. Laura and I, yes, we were younger once. Yeah, I can't believe that kid, but a lucky guy, beautiful and wonderful, sweet wife. We had such a great time. Now, this left out of St. Louis on a cruise, headed all the way to St. Paul. And right away, we learned that the water was really high. We had to limbo under the bridge here in St. Louis, heading out. I got a great shot under the bridge looking back at the St. Louis Arch. Now, every bridge that we would come to suddenly turned into a fascinating little navigational work as our team had to calculate the level of the river and the height of the boat. And sometimes we would just slide right under. This is at the back of the vessel, looking back over the calliope whistles here. Oh, I loved working on that boat. My wonderful bride, Laura, was performing with a quartet on board. Some of the most talented people, a six-piece band. My gosh, we had a good time. She also did a solo show, which comes into this story here in just a second. Again, every time we went under a bridge, even all of the passengers would gather upstairs to kind of watch us slide under. But when we got to Hannibal, Missouri, the river level was so high and the bridge was so low that we weren't sure we were going to be able to make it. And everybody gathered to watch as the boat crept up to the bridge. Now, on the Mississippi Queen and many old boats, the flagpole or the jackstaff on the front of the vessel was often built to the height of the top of the pilot house back behind. So you knew if that flagpole went under the bridge, the rest of your boat was going to make it. Well, as we crept forward that day, we finally learned we weren't going to make it. The jackstaff touched the edge of the bridge, bent back, and we reversed off and pulled back over into Hannibal and sat there some more. Well, finally, my lovely wife Laura's show was the evening show, and the cruise director came to her right before the show and said, "The captain says the river has dropped a little bit. We think we might have a chance. We may during the show go for it." Now, I think we had been stuck in Hannibal at this point by 3 days. And so everybody, of course, was excited about this. Laura told him, when they decide to go, if it looks like we're going to make it, come and stand at the edge of the stage and stop the show, make an announcement, and we'll adjourn and let everybody's going to want to see us get under this bridge. So sure enough, he did. Bob Symbiote, our wonderful cruise director, stopped the show. We all went up to the top of the boat. My beautiful bride in her show dress. We stood up there along with most of the other passengers and finally watched as the boat crept again back up to the bridge. And we cleared it literally by so little that some of the crew members were able to lean up and touch the top of the bridge. The smokestacks that laid down to let us limbo underneath just skimmed underneath the bridge, and all of the passengers were out seeing this. Now, very much like the Grand Excursion of 1854, that great story I told you about, led by Millard Fillmore, every place they stopped, there were crowds gathered along the way. The same was true for us at every lock and dam, at every little town that we docked in. A tremendous reception, and we cruised on up the river. I told you about how the reporters from the East were absolutely blown away by the beauty of the upper Mississippi River. We had a chance to enjoy that through a mix of different weathers, as did the Grand Excursion of 1854. Some rain, some shine, some beautiful sunsets, some gorgeous stretches of river. I always loved looking out over the stage, the gangway, looking out off into the river. Now, the further north we got, the more exciting things became, as crowds were lined along the banks to see us. And finally, this flotilla of boats recreating this, we caught up to the rest of them who were short enough to go under the bridge. We waited at Hannibal. We caught up to them just before we could see St. Paul off in the distance. And I took a bunch of photos that day. I'll just let them kind of roll here over my shoulder. The old Delta Queen was traveling right alongside of us. We saw little paddle wheel recreations of every type, from barge to passenger overnight boat to day cruise boat to little ferry type boats, all coming up from every corner of the river system. Some from as far away as I think even Cincinnati came and joined us for this great journey up the river. Well, finally, as we pulled into town, just like it happened on the Grand Excursion, sometimes they get to port and the storm clouds would gather. We had the same thing happen as we got to St. Paul, and as the rain unfolded, we were still delighted to see that a huge crowd had gathered along the waterfront right there at the base of downtown St. Paul to watch us come in. To kind of tie it into the railroad aspect of that Grand Excursion experience, the Canadian Pacific Beautiful 2816 came along the tracks and viewed all of the festiveness as well. It is one of my great cherished memories of getting to lecture and speak out there on the river, and traveling on the Mississippi Queen was always one of the highlights for me, and the Grand Excursion still really stands out. Just thought I'd share that little personal story with you, a few pictures from that great trip back in 2004. Again, if you have not yet, it's a great talk. Go on over to historyhighlights.com and get a chance to enjoy the Grand Excursion. And I certainly hope you'll prowl around our website for all kinds of great tales. It's a joy sharing all of these with you. Thanks for being a part of this journey of discovery. Have a great day, folks, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.